Welcome back to Shorty's SuperCoach. Today in the Shorty's Shortlist series, we'll be taking a look at the Fremantle Dockers as we preview everything relevant to SuperCoach in 2016. Obviously at this early stage we won't be delving too far into the exact, every player on the list sort of thing and everyone relevant. Just going to have a bit more of a look at some players that offer some value, potentially undervalued and underpriced, might be able to break out, really up their points average this season. So, we're going to bypass the likes of Mundy, Neal, Fyfe because, we know basically what we're going to get from them. And, I'm not telling you anything you don't know about those players. We're going to have a look at, few players that are of interest and should probably be on your radar at this point, and then as the pre-season really amps up, we'll obviously narrow our focus on some of those guns and the real place by place in our SuperCoach sides. But we're going to start with Michael Barlow, and he's a really interesting one, I think. Obviously he gets the dual position status as a midfield forward this season. That affects us in two ways, I suppose. I mean, on one hand, it's great to have a player of his ability available as a forward, but it then makes you wonder, obviously he got that because he played over 35% game time in the forward line, which, obviously suggests a change in role. And his numbers reflected that. He had career lows in possessions, 22.9 average, contested ball, just 9 per game, and clearances, just a 2.2 a game. So, all career lows for Barlow. And yes, he's had his injury concerns at times, but he's, over the course, been a pretty reliable player. Of course, that amazing debut season where he averaged 116, 83.7, 95.2, then 110, 111.7 in 2013 and 2014 as he really started to establish himself as an absolute elite midfielder of the competition, and last year just returned 93.6. So it makes you wonder, why was the case? I mean, was it Lachie Neale's emergence? Did he take a bit more game time away from the midfield for Barlow? I mean, I'm not really too sure, because with the amount of rotations that happen in the modern game, you wouldn't think just one player having a better season and upping the ante in that regard would affect Barlow so much. I mean, he dropped 18 points per game. So I think possibly Ross Lyon was looking at a slight position change for Barlow, and it didn't work. So he's definitely one to keep your eye on over the pre-season, because if he goes back to that role that we know he can do in the midfield, where he's pure ball magnet. I mean, he wins his own footy, he runs hard, he's an old-fashioned footballer. He doesn't have absolute class or absolute speed or anything, but he wins the footy, can just get plenty of the ball and uses it pretty well, and obviously reflects in good SuperCoach points. So look, I think Barlow is definitely a guy you're going to have to keep on your radar, because he'd be pretty hard to turn away from, especially if he's, in that pre-season NAB challenge and all that. He really starts to fire up and, getting those 30 possessions a game, which we know he can do. He'd be a tough man to say no to for our forward lines. Another man who is also very interesting and also a midfield forward and will affect Barlow to some degree is Harley Bennell. Now, I think he's a man that I've always wanted to fit into my SuperCoach side. I've always, every year, been looking at him going, this could be the year that he gets up to 110 average. This could be the year. And I still feel like that year is coming, because one day he will, all providing that he keeps himself out of trouble and continues his career happening, then he will destroy the competition at one point. He's got that much class, that much natural ability. If he can just get a bit of discipline happening, up the fitness levels, and become more hardened, he can definitely be an absolute jet. I mean, he's already playing as good a games as most players. It's just that consistency. So last year, career high average SuperCoach wise 101.7. Before then, he just sort of got 97, 96, 95, just around that mark. So he upped it by a solid 5 to 6 points, which is very good for him, but there's no query on his scoring. That's the thing. The two main queries, of course, is his off-field stuff. I mean, we know he constantly gets in trouble. That's why he's at the Dockers. How's that going to work out for him? I think, can Ross Lyon get the best out of him? He, in the past, has been able to get the best out of most players, but Bennell is proven a very tricky man to keep under wraps and continually seems to bugger up and just doesn't seem to learn. So that's an absolute worry for us when you go to select a guy like him. Also, his durability. He's only played the 15 games in each of the last 3 years, so he often will miss games with little issues, whether it be off-field or injury. So I think, he's got a massive ceiling. He scores huge when he's up and about. That we know. It's whether you're willing to gamble what else he has to offer, and that's the downside, that he can cause a bit of mischief and he can, potentially be dropped or be suspended, things like that. So he's an absolute risk, no doubt, but to be honest, at this point in time, I would be staying away from him, despite the fact that I said I've always wanted to fit him to my side. I think now he doesn't really offer that much value anyway. I mean, 101.7, he's going to be pricey. He could up his average 7 or 8 points per game, which would be great, but it doesn't exactly, for the risks that he often does entail when you go to pick a guy like him. It's a big risk, and it's always about weighing up the reward compared to the risk, and at this point in time, I can't see Bennell outweighing the reward. So probably a guy you keep on your radar and have a look, but at this point I would be steering clear. So the main two from a Fremantle point of view, as far as looking into 2016, a couple of guys that I'll touch on, a few younger players. Hayden Crozier, a bit of a gut feel for mine here. I'm not saying go out and pick him, but he averaged 42.2, had 4 games where he played less than 45% game time, so he's been a bit of a victim of the sub-vest, but I've got a feeling that if it's not this year or if it's down the track, that Crozier will become a midfielder at some point and really play, or at least high half forward, which we know can be pretty tantalising when you're looking at your forwards, if they can get up the ground, get in that midfield a little bit. I don't think he'll be a pure midfielder this year, but I think he could have that opportunity to actually win a bit more of the footy. So I don't think he offers too much. I mean, he'll be priced pretty low, but unless he explodes NAB Challenge and really puts himself on the radar, he just doesn't really fit into any structure. He's not cheap enough. He doesn't offer enough upside, really. But I do think down the track, he'll be a player we look at, and I think this year he will definitely up that points per game average by a considerable margin. The next man is one of my favourites, Tom Sheridan. Now you might go, gee, what has he even done? Who is that bloke? Because over in Victoria, we don't hear too much about the Western Australian youngsters, and Ross Lyon, has historically held them back. But Sheridan played the 17 games last year for a total of 38 in his career. So he's had to work for it because he's 22 years of age. So he's had to work pretty hard, as most youngsters do under Lyon. Last year he found his feet in defence. So really throughout his junior career he was a gun midfielder. In the 18s for the Calder Cannons he averaged 24 touches, 4.7 tackles, won plenty of the ball, used it, not too bad, but definitely in and under, that's where he's winning it, and that's what he did very well. So I think naturally he is a midfielder. He found his place and played, I think it was the last 16 or 17 games for the Dockers, in defence mainly. So that's why he is now a pure defender that we can pick him, which, does make me wonder and tempt me even for a draft prospect. The problem with him is he won't be that cheap. He averaged 65.1, so it just puts him in that awkward range where, look, I think he potentially, if he can find that role in the midfield, which I think it's offering up, despite the fact I've talked about Barlow going back in there and Bennell, that has got to make you wonder a little bit. But I think Sheridan potentially is sort of that next generation player that the Dockers eventually got to start looking at. They're kind of in that drifting window, whether the premiership window is still available or not. And I think guys like Crozier and Sheridan definitely have to step up and more so be given the opportunity to step up. So he had 3 sub-affected games last year, so he still hasn't quite rid himself of the sub-vest, but that's the nature of the beast with that. Eventually, if you're young and inconsistent, you're going to cop it naturally. So it's great that it's gone, but he did cement himself. So had a couple of decent finals. I mean, he had 25 and 22 touches in the 2 finals. Unfortunately, probably be best remembered for that mark that he horribly dropped and panicked, and then Rioli snapped it round from 40 and that somehow bounced through. So unfortunately tainted there, but I really think if he gets that midfield opportunity, he's a gun in the making. He averaged 110 SuperCoach points in his juniors with the Cannons that I mentioned before. So I really do think if he's playing through the midfield in the NAB Challenge, you would definitely consider him. Probably not for your SuperCoach Classic, but definitely in your draft. A lot of your mates may have no idea who this bloke is and just see that, nothing really lights up off the page when you look at his pure numbers. He's just a bit of a dour defender, hasn't really scored that high, he's just that mid-price sort of dude, but he has potential, no doubt about it. So Sheridan, definitely one to watch, I feel, because he's coming into that prime and has cemented himself, and I feel he can go one step better. And I reckon I'll go out on a limb and say he could average 85 plus if given the opportunity. Finally, Anthony Morabito. Of course, he was drafted again on the rookie list. You wouldn't go out and pick him because of all the injury troubles he's had, plus he's on the rookie list, but you know, someone that at some point in time, depending how injuries go for him and others, he could be someone we talk about, but not at this point. But he's worth a mention, and hopefully he can get some game time eventually, because he's been ruined with terrible luck with the injury side of things. But that wraps it up for the Dockers. Not too much there for us. A few players to definitely think about, and a few maybe for your draft, and some young players coming through. But definitely you want to have a look at Barlow and Bennell. I think they're two guys that offer a lot of upside, and the fact that they're midfield forwards, you know, they're guys to have on your radar. And if you're feeling a bit risky for Bennell, you might take him and he may pay off. He may have a career best year. And Barlow, I think, will be, you know, on the tip of most people's tongues when it comes to that forward line. So if you've liked the video, give it a like. If you've got any other Dockers players that I missed, or you feel add a bit of value, could break out, you know, definitely let me know. Put it in the comments. But subscribe to the channel, because I'll be churning out plenty of SuperCoach content as the pre-season really gets going, and also throughout the season, of course. So it'll be great when it gets even closer, because we're just a bit of guesswork at the moment as the players continue to train before we really see much footy. So definitely keep clicking back to the channel, because there's plenty of SuperCoach stuff there, and we'll see you guys next time.